When you're ready.
Okay. All right, so it is recording. Welcome everyone to Learn to Crochet with Marley Bird. Like I said, we are here as part of our Fave Craft Studio Live virtual classes. Today we are sponsored by our friends at I Like Crochet magazine. Marley is here. She is going to lead the show today on teaching all of you guys how to crochet. So if you've ever crocheted before, this is a great refresher course to kind of get some tips and tricks on how to crochet even better and faster. If you're brand new to crochet, then welcome. Marley is the perfect teacher to teach you all the ins and outs of this wonderful, wonderful hobby. So like I said, we're sponsored today by I Like Crochet magazine. So for all of the attendees of today's class, we actually have a super exciting introductory offer for you to share. So you can get a 1-year membership to our All Access Gold Club. It's 75% off the normal price of, it's almost $50 normally. So today you can get it for the special price of $11.88, which is an awesome deal. It's kind of like the Netflix of crochet. It's just like all of the patterns that you could ever possibly want or need is available in this digital magazine. They publish 6 times a year. You'll get tons of patterns available at your fingertips. It's all digital. Everything is tech edited. There is no advertising in any of the digital magazines, 0 advertisements. There's video tutorials, full color photographs for quick and easy learning. You'll find more than 100 exclusive patterns per year throughout all of the magazines. And there's tons of different patterns, shawls, sweaters, socks, Afghans, truly anything you could ever want is in this magazine. So for $11.88, you can get a whole year subscription to this magazine. Anyway, that's just a little bit about I Like Crochet. I'm going to pass it over to Marley, who will be leading today's class. Thank you, Marley, for being here. And thank you to all of the attendees for joining us today. I'm super excited. We are recording the class. If you have any questions throughout the class, please use the Q&A box at the bottom. There's a chat, which you can use as well to, say hi and whatnot. But if you have any questions that you need us to answer, about this I Like Crochet magazine offer or about crochet in general, if you have a question about what Marley's doing, we will try to get that answered for you in real time. We are also going to be doing a brief Q&A at the end, so it's possible that we'll hold some of your questions for the Q&A at the end. So again, without further ado, Marley, please take it away.
All right, so I'm gonna go away from that screen so y'all get to see my beautiful face. Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you, Jenny, so much for inviting me to be a part of this. As she said, my name is Marley Bird. I am a knitwear and crochet designer. I have a YouTube channel. It's just Marley Bird, and I'm also a stitch ambassador for Yarnspiration. So I am in the crochet industry all the time. So I love to crochet. It is absolutely something that takes up a lot of my time and I don't mind doing it. It's always a thrill when I get to teach beginners how to crochet because I love to see that aha moment. And so there's a couple rules I want us all to agree on before we jump in. And so we're all going to do kind of like our scouts honor. I don't even know what sort of like finger terminology to use, but we're all going to like promise one another. The first thing is that we're going to be patient with ourselves, right? This is a entirely new skill for many of you. And all that means is that you are going to have some time to allow your hands to have some muscle memory and create a rhythm to what you're doing. So even though your brain and your eyes might be like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to do, and your hands are like, da, 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 I'm going to come over here and do this. We're going to be patient with our hands. We're going to allow them to gradually get into the rhythm of what's going to happen. And as long as you practice and you're patient with yourself, you will eventually begin to crochet easier. So it might look really easy when I do it. I've been doing it for over 25 years. So once you get to 25 years, you will look that easy too, but it's not going to take you that long, I promise. But I do need you to be a little patient with yourself. Okay. The other thing here is referring back to practice. You need to make sure that if this is something you really want to do, you need to promise me that you will practice at least 10 to 15 minutes a day. Just pick it up and try and get a couple of stitches in, trying to get some sort of a rhythm with your hands, okay? The more you practice, the easier it will be and you will be just fine. The last thing I want you to make sure you do is when you start to adventure out and doing other patterns and seeking more advice, make sure you go to some trusted professionals, just like the I Like Crochet professionals, the All Free Crochet website, and marleybird.com. I can tell you 100% you will find 100%, I said that twice now, quality information in those locations. Okay. So there are a lot of people in the world that know how to crochet, but when you are looking for quality content, quality technician, and just good old fashioned fun, those are some good places to go. All right, guys. So those are the mini rules. I know that Jenny has sent out essentially a materials list for you today. So that's where I'm going to jump in to begin with. We're going to talk about the hook, talk about the yarn, and then we will jump into some stitches. As Jenny mentioned, I do want you to put your questions in the Q&A if you have them. And I want to remind you, this is getting recorded. So if at some point, maybe you're not getting a certain stitch that I'm working on, don't get frustrated. It's okay, right? We're going to promise each other we're not getting frustrated, but it might be you just need to take a little extra time or sit down your work and then watch the recording and do it again. So it will all be there. We aren't going to just jump ahead and you won't ever be able to catch up again. You'll be able to catch up, no problem. All right. Okay. So let's go down to my hands and we're going to jump in, y'all. Okay. So as we're down here, I'm going to make sure, there we are. So I am changing it up a little bit today. I have a paper and a Sharpie so I can show you, I'm going to show you some symbols as we're working along too, because I feel like that will help you understand what we're doing. So I have that there just for my own purposes. But this is a crochet hook. And you might be like, well, that looks a little different than my others. Well, no, it's the same thing. It's just I have a handle on this one. It just makes it easier for me to grip the crochet hook itself. But the anatomy of a crochet hook, you guys, you have right up here, this is the tip or the head of the hook. And you have hooks that are a little bit more inclined than others. And those are usually called Susan Bates hooks. I don't know if you can see that. Is that easier if I go up a little bit closer? So that is an inclined sort of head. The boy heads are a little bit more rounded. Let me see if I have one real quick. I probably should have just grabbed one. I know I have one. Oh my goodness gracious. Don't you hate that when you're looking for something, you know you have it and it goes away? Well, maybe I don't have it, y'all. Okay, can you see this one? Can you see how it's a little bit more rounded versus as sharp and inclined as that one is? Okay, so they're the same purpose. They both work great, but you'll find that whichever one you use to start crocheting with, that's going to end up being your favorite. Okay, so you have the tip, you have this inclined area, which is the throat. So notice that area is smaller than the rest of the hook. So the biggest thing we do with that area is that helps us to be able to get our hook into stitches and make stitches big enough so that we can work through the stitch. But after we create a stitch, we want to make sure it gets back here to this portion of the hook, which is called the shank or the shaft. And the shank or the shaft, that is the size of the hook that determines the size of your stitch. So you'll notice as this gold hook right here, notice the shank or the shaft is a much bigger size than that one. And this is a bigger hook. This is an N hook and this one is an I hook. So if I were to make stitches with this, as long as I make my stitch come back up here to the shank or the shaft, that stitch will be that size versus if I was making a stitch with this, if I make my stitch the same size as this shank or shaft, it'll make the size there. That's really important as you're working with things and you talk about gauge and the size of your stitches. It's very important you bring your stitch up to the shank or the shaft. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. The further thing there is the thumb grip. Okay. Now you can use your crochet hook and hold it like a knife, just like this, or you can hold it like a pencil. I tend to hold mine like a pencil. It doesn't matter which way you do it. You do what works best for you and how you're comfortable. My grandmother taught me how to hold it like a pencil, so I hold it like a pencil. Okay. So those are the basics of the crochet hook. As far as the yarn, we're not going to go too in depth about yarn.
Hey, Marley,
but quick. Essentially,
Marley,
do you have a question, Jenny?
Yes, I do. Real quick, can you just discuss if there's a major difference between the steel crochet hooks and different materials of the crochet hook?
Sure. So the metal crochet hooks, they're going to glide a little bit better as you're working, especially with some acrylics. If you're using a wood hook, which I know I have that, da 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 da. So like I have a wood hook right here, and this is rosewood, and it has a nice finish to it, so it glides a little bit, but notice the hook is a little bit pointier up here and it's more rounded in there. So it just feels differently. And notice there is no thumb part on this one. It's all, the shank is like all the size of the whole hook. So it's a little bit different there. People with arthritis, I've been told, like to use more wood hooks or bamboo hooks because they tend to warm up in your hand a little bit more. I don't know if that's true or not. I will tell you that I don't have arthritis yet, but I crochet so much that I use hooks like this. So this is just like this red one, only it's blue. And I have a big handle on it because as I hold it, notice I don't have to grip as small as like if I was doing this one, real tiny. I have a nice big grip here and it's easier for me. And I've been told that that's easier for other people who have arthritis or trouble gripping things, like having a bigger handle. So you could use any sort of handle or no handle or anything, like there's all sorts of things to use out there. The biggest thing that you're going to be concerned about is that you have enough space on your shank or shaft area for all the stitches you're going to use, and make sure that you get your stitch up to that area. So that way, when you're making the stitches, they're all the same size. Is that helpful? Yeah. These are my favorite. I love these. I love the big handle because my hand doesn't cramp. All right, so yarn. Yarn comes in many different weights, you guys. The size 4 medium, that is a pretty generic, basic worsted weight yarn. This is Red Heart with Love. That's the same thing with Super Saver or Yarnspirations or Premier or Lion Brand. Everybody has a size 4 sort of worsted weight yarn. So this is a really good basic yarn to start off with. I would also say if you're looking at this information here, they often will tell you what size hook is recommended for the size yarn you're using. And notice I said recommended. This does not mean that I can only use a K hook with this yarn. It just means they recommend a K hook. But for me, I very rarely use a K hook with this yarn. I actually use an I or even an H hook. So that's that. I know I said I or H, they come in different US size I or H, or they come in millimeters. So this one here is a 5.5 millimeter. And then they have like this blue one here. This is a US size H or 8, which is a 5 millimeter. So as you're looking at different patterns and they give you the hook sizes, I tend to look at the millimeter size versus the letter because it's a little bit more accurate. Okay, so you can use any yarn you want with any hook you want. You don't have to only use the size hook listed on the label. That's purely recommended. When it comes to the size of hook you should use, that all depends on the size of the stitch you're ultimately trying to get to, okay? That's what's called gauge, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we're going along. Everybody with me so far? All right. The first thing we want to do is we want to put a slip knot on our hook. And when we do this, the slip knot does not count as a stitch. Now I'm going to repeat that because that's very important. When we put the slip knot on our hook, it does not count as a stitch. So when I make a slip knot, I will usually put the tail of the yarn in the palm of my hand, take my working yarn, wrap it around my forefinger and middle finger. And when I come back up, I will cross over. Then I turn my hand over. You can take your hook and go underneath that front loop and grab that back loop and pull it out. Take your fingers out and pull the 2 strands at the bottom. Now I have this big loop here. Well, here's what's convenient. You pull these 2 legs apart and it tightens up that strand. And where did I tighten it up to? My shank, right? My shaft, because I want it to be that stitch. I left a nice long tail. Always leave a long tail. Don't be afraid. Oh, I'm going to waste yarn. No, leave a long tail so you can weave that in later. These are huge tips, you guys. These are things that other people are not telling you. You need to know this. Leave a long tail. Once you get that slip knot on your hook, you want to begin with a chain. So I'm not gonna, guys, I'm not gonna dwell on how you should hold your yarn because that's something that you will begin to be familiar with as you work along. At this point, I want you to just kind of get comfortable with the stitches and go from there, okay? So I usually will just hold my yarn, and what I'm going to do is I'm gonna take my hook and I'm gonna go around my yarn just like so. And as I pull this, what is called a yarn over, I'm going to pull it through the loop that's on my hook. And when I pull it through, I'm going to rotate my hook itself so that this hook portion there is pointing down. And the reason I'm doing that is because if you tilt this way, can you see how the loop on my hook itself is sort of like a teardrop? So if I were to bring my hook through this loop this way, see how it wants to snag? Okay. But if I rotate it where the hook is pointing down, it goes right through that teardrop. Can you see that? Okay. So if I'm going to yarn over my hook and then pull this yarn over through the loop, I don't want it to catch, but if I rotate my hook and pull it through, it easily pops through. Can you see that? I'm going to do that again because I'm going to point something else out. You'll notice I am gripping the knot to make it stable so it's not flopping around on me. So I'm gripping the knot, going around the yarn, and I pull that yarn through. I want to make sure that that yarn that I just pulled through is the size of my hook, so I move it up to my shaft. And then I repeat. Yarn over my hook, bring that yarn through, pull it up to the shaft. Yarn over my hook, pull that yarn through, move it up to the shaft. We're going to do this for a couple times, okay, guys? So we're just going to get comfortable with this. I'm going to let you just do this a few times before I give you any more instructions. Right now, I just want you to yarn over and pull through. Yarn over and pull through. I don't care if it's ugly. I don't care if you're just like it's tight. I don't care if it's loose right now. I just want you to kind of get into this rhythm. Yarn over and pull through. Now don't go like this. Don't like put your hook under. Make sure you're yarning over and pull through. Over and pull through. If you're doing this correctly, you're going to notice you get a nice line of what looks like V's. Okay, they look like V's on the top. And on the bottom, they look like bumps. Okay, you see that? I call those the butt of the stitch. All right, so you have the V's on top, you have those bumps, which I call the butt of the stitch. There are some people who will tell you to work into the butt of the stitch to work the first row. I'm not going to have you do that. Okay, it's fun, it's great, and it's something that's definitely a nice detailed thing. But for beginners, I just want you to go directly into the stitch itself. So we're going to do that eventually. But the first thing I want you to do is take your hook out and rip that all out. And we're going to do this again. Dun, dun, dun. You guys see that? Okay, so we're going to start this all one more time. Here we go. I'm going to take the working or the tail and I've put it in the palm of my hand. Take the working yarn, wrap it around my forefinger and my middle finger, come back up and cross over. Rotate my hand over, go underneath the front loop, grab the back loop and pull it off. And then just tighten that up. So that's my slip knot. Does the slip knot count as a stitch? No, I hear everybody. It's like preschool. No. Okay, so it does not count as a stitch. And now I want you to chain 11. So I'm gripping the slip knot so it doesn't go anywhere. I'm going to take my hook, go around my yarn and pull that through. Now, the last thing I want you guys to do when you get it, you pull this through and you have that stitch up there on your shaft. I do not want you to pull the yarn extra tight at that point, okay? I want you to keep it nice and comfortable, not too loose. I don't want it that loose, but I don't want it that super tight, right? I want it to be comfortable, okay? So it should be the width or the circumference of the hook, but see, I can still move it around, all right? That's very important. And I'm gonna do it again. Notice that the stitch that was on, or I shouldn't call it a stitch, the loop that was on my hook is now the chain down there. And notice it's not too tight. And that's because I kept it that nice balanced size.
Marley, real quick, Marcia is wondering, is it normal for the chain to twist?
It is, and I'm getting ready to talk about how to maintain control of that.
There you go. I'll let you do
All right. So, Marcia, actually, after you get about 3 or 4 chains in, so usually about this far in, I will take the pad of my thumb that's not holding my hook, and I will make sure I'm looking at the V's. So I'm looking at the flat side or the top side of my chains, and I'll take the pad of my thumb and I'll rest it onto the top of my chains, right up next to my hook. What that's going to do is, just like at the start when I was holding on to my slip knot to maintain control, I'm doing the same thing, but just at a different point of my chains. So I'll do 3 or 4 chains, and then I move my pad of my thumb up and I like pinch. I'm pinching those stitches. They don't go anywhere. And I'll do another chain. And then I'll do another chain. And I'll do another chain. So I've done 3. I have my chains nice and straight, and I move the pad of my thumb up. Can you see how that works? What that will do is it will keep your chains from twisting around on you and getting out of control. Can you guys see this? All right. That's why my chains are not twisted. Now, once you've done all your chains, you might have to go back and count. So all you're going to do is, I always look at the V side. So I don't look at the butt, I look at the V's, and I count my V's. So I never count the loop on my hook. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I have 12 and I wanted 11. So all I do is I take my hook out and I pull out 1 chain, put my hook back in, and I have my 11 chains. You guys with me on this so far? Okay. All right. Here we go, y'all. Now that we have the chains here, we have something to build into. So this is just like if it was knitting, we just cast on stitches. If this was sewing, we just cut our fabric and we're getting ready to sew 2 pieces of fabric together. We have something to work into now. I will let you know, this is the hardest part of crochet. This one row, no matter how long you've been crocheting, this is the most tedious, most strenuous part. So do not let this part break you. Get past it and we will prevail. Okay, guys? The first
Marley,
thing I want...
do you have any just real quick beginner tips on, I know you said you didn't want to spend a ton of time on how to hold the yarn, but a few people are kind of struggling with how to hold yarn. Do you have any, before we go to just quick basic tips?
Sure. So I have friends who like just to hold the yarn like this. I have friends who hold the yarn wrapped around their finger a couple times like this. I actually like to wrap it around my pinky a couple times, and then I take my fingers and I go underneath and I hold it like that. And then my pinky kind of acts as a tension. And so that's, I mean, nobody taught me that. It's literally one of those things that over time, that's just become comfortable to me. So I don't know if that helps you guys see. I wrap it around my pinky a couple times, and then I go over top of the 3 fingers, and then I'm able to grasp whatever I'm doing and just work. Does that help?
Yes, right? Thank you so much.
And that's the same if you're left-handed. Like if you're left-handed, it's the same thing. Because I hold my yarn like this if I'm going to knit. So that's why I know I can do it like that. Okay. So it's the same thing. All right. So we have our chains here, and I'm going to look at them as if they're like this, as if they're horizontal, because this is going to be our fabric. I'm looking at my V's, and we're going to start off with a single crochet, you guys. We never count the loop on our hook. And so usually when you come across crochet instructions for a single crochet, and these are US terms, everybody, these are US terms. The single crochet will be skip the first chain and then single crochet into the second chain. All right. So all that means here is we will not go into that first chain right there. Okay. That first V. I am going to go to this second V, and I'm literally going to take my hook and pierce it right down the center of that V. And what that will do if you notice, as I pierce my hook down the center of that V, that puts the back leg of the V and the butt of my stitch on my hook. Can you guys see that? I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to go to the second chain from hook. So not the first. I'm going to go to the second. I'm going to pierce the V. And if I were to rotate it like this, I can see I have the back leg of the V and the butt of my stitch on my hook. Awesome. So it's just like I took a knitting or a needle and pierced it through some fabric. So now I want to get my yarn or my thread and pull it through. So just like when we were chaining, we chained just like that, right? Because our hook was here and we chained, we grabbed our chain, and we're going to pull this chain through that stitch that we just went into. So I'm going to pull that right on through.
Marley, real quick, if Jennifer is asking, I'm only able to get the back leg on my hook instead of the leg and the butt of the stitch when I go through my chain. Is that because my tension is too tight?
It could be. And you know what? I'm going to tell her that that's okay. Keep working down just through the back leg if that's all you can get into right now. Right. I just want you to get into some fabric. So that's absolutely fine.
Thank you.
Yep. She's just a little bit more advanced than everybody else. That's it. Jennifer, stop being a showboat. All right. So no, in all honesty, that's totally fine. So I went into the stitch, I yarned over, and then I pulled that yarn over through. That's what that's called. So I pulled up a loop is what it'll be written in a pattern. So I pulled up a loop. Did I leave my loop down here at my throat? No, I made the loop the same size as the shaft of my hook. That's very important. I saw some questions earlier where people are like, they struggle getting gauge. This is one of the number one things to help you guys. If you always make sure the loop that you pull up is the same size as your hook, you'll get gauge. So I've pulled up a loop. I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over my hook, which is the same thing as if I was chaining, right? So it's like I'm just chaining. So I'm yarning over. If this helps, it's like you're going over top towards the front. Or if I turn it this way, I'm going just like when I was chaining before. It's the same motion. And then I'm going to pull this yarn over through both loops. So you'll notice I'm grasping what would be called the post of the stitch to give it stability. And then I'm going to take my hook. My hook is pointing down, remember, because my stitches are like a teardrop. And I pull that loop through the 2 loops on my hook. All right, y'all see that? Now I'm going to take a second right here and I want you to see. So I've pulled that through. You see how the resulting stitch, the top of the resulting stitch, what does that look like? It looks like a V, right? It looks like the top of the chains, just like before. That's great. That's what we want. The top of crochet stitches, they look like V's, you guys. So because I want to make sure that our edges are nice and straight, I want to remember that that is the first stitch of this row. So when I come back down the row, I know that'll be the last stitch of the next row. So I'm going to take a removable stitch marker and I am putting it through the V behind the loop on my hook. So it's the top of the stitch I just completed. I'm just going to put a stitch marker in there. Can you guys see that? Nothing special. Just have the loop on our hook. This is the V. That is the top of the stitch we just made. And now I'm going to carry on. So we've did it into the first chain. So I'm looking at my work and I can see my work is into that first chain. So I go to the next chain. I go right down the center. I can see that I have the back loop and the butt of the stitch on my hook, which is great. Or Jennifer, it's just the back loop, which Jennifer looks just like this. That's totally fine. I'm going to yarn over my hook, pull that yarn over through the chain, and then make sure it goes back up to the size of my hook. Now I grasp my stitches just to give myself some stability, yarn over my hook, and pull through the 2 loops. And we're going to do this all the way down. So I go to the next chain, I pierce the chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. I want to point this out. Did you notice that when I pulled over, when I yarned over and pulled through 2, I put my hook back like this so that this resulting loop on my hook is the size of my hook, right? I didn't leave it down there. I made it so it goes back up there to the same size as my hook. When it's all done too, I don't give it an extra pull to make it tight. Keep it just nice and relaxed and comfortable. You don't have to make it tighter. You don't have to make it looser. You just have to make it the same size as your hook. Go to the next chain. Go into the chain. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Notice I'm still keeping everything horizontal. I grasp, yarn over, and pull through 2. I have friends who they'll start crocheting their first row like this, and I don't know how they do it. I like to see it as if it was my fabric still being made. So I like to look at it just like this. And you'll notice that I tend to grab this end to hold it steady for myself. So I will go into the chain, yarn over, pull up a loop. And I can just yarn over and pull through. It's just trickier, right? Because see, look, that stitch isn't as consistent as those because I didn't stabilize it. Whereas if I go in, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then stabilize, and then finish, it's much more consistent. So I'm going to get all the stitches done down this row. So I'm going into each chain. And remember, if you are frustrated right now, it's okay. This is something completely new and it might take a little time, okay? I promise you will get this. When you get down here to the end, make sure you do use that last chain. So go into that last chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. Okay? By the end of this row, if you had 11 chains, you should have 10 single crochets. And you can count them. And I want you to see there. See how it's twisting on me? Totally normal. That's totally normal. You just force it back to where you want it to be. And you could always look at the top, see those nice V's, and you can count those just like we did when we counted our chains, right? So we can count our V's. So I'm going to count the one behind the loop on my hook. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I know that's the last one because I've already marked it. Can you guys see that? Okay. Now I'm going to set this down for a minute so that way those of you who are not done with the chain row can still catch up, which is fine. We're going to pull this in and use this just for a second. So what we've done, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we chained 11. So I'm going to put my 11th right up there. Okay. So we chained 11 and then we did a single crochet in the second chain from hook. So not the first chain from hook, but in the second chain from hook, we did a single crochet. And then we went to the next chain from hook and we did a single crochet. And we did that all the way down into each one of the chains we created. Okay. I want you to notice this one chain that I kind of put out there to the side. What that one chain did for us is it allowed it so that when we started working back down our row, our stitches were the correct height they needed to be for those single crochets. That's our turning chain, all right? For the next row, if I want to do a double crochet, which is what we're going to do, okay? So I want to do a double crochet in the top of that single crochet. The first thing that I got to do whenever you transition to the next row of a crochet is you have to have your turning chains. So in order to make sure that we have the correct height in our chains for that double crochet, we need to have the correct number of turning chains. So we would have 3 turning chains. The theory here is that 3 chains equal the same height as a double crochet. Now I'm going to give you a side note here. I usually only do 2 because I think it looks better, but the real rule is 3. Okay. So that's when somebody's like, why do I have to do these chains? It's so that way the next row is the correct height. It's like we're taking a step up to the next height. Because this stitch, the single crochet, is shorter than this stitch. So we have to have more chains to accommodate that height. Does that make sense, y'all? All right. So we're going to chain 3. We are going to chain 3. And then I'm going to show you how to do a double crochet into that single. Now, here's the cool thing, y'all. As you're beginning to do these next stitches, they're so much easier to work into the stitches than the chains. So hopefully you're not giving up on me yet, all right?
Really, would this be a good, we're at about halfway through. Is this a good point for a quick intermission, or do you want to keep going?
I was going to say, let me get them started on the doubles just for the first two. And then as they're working down the row, you can talk about the intermission.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So we just said we finished the first row. Now we got to essentially take a stair step up to the next row. So I'm going to chain 3. So just like when we were doing normal chains, I chain 3 stitches. So 1, 2, and 3. Theoretically, that'll be the correct height of my double. So now I turn my work, and all that means is I rotate it so that way I have my work over here so that I can work back down it, right? Pretty easy stuff. We're going to do essentially the same type of stitch, only this time we're going to yarn over our hook to begin with. So you yarn over your hook to begin with. And then if I were to rotate this up, I can see that V there, right? I'm no longer just going to go down the center of the V because then that only puts the back leg on, just like what Jennifer was doing. I want to get both of these legs this time. So instead of looking at the top, I'm going to kind of look at the side, and you see there's like a hole right there. I'm going to put my hook through that hole. And so now I get the front leg and the back leg. All right. Yarn over my hook, just like we're doing all along, and pull up a loop. Notice I bring that loop to the same size as my hook, and I pause. So I have 3 loops on my hook. I yarn over, I pinch the base, and I pull through 2. I have 2 loops on my hook. I yarn over, pinch the base, and pull through 2. I now have a taller stitch than I had before. I have a V right there. It's the top of the stitch. It's behind the loop on my hook. I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to place it into that V. So I know that that's the last stitch of my row. I'm going to completely ignore these turning chains, okay? In another video, in like a Crochet 201 or something, we'll talk more about the turning chains. I'm going to ignore those for right now, okay? Now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and do my double crochets all the way down the row. So I yarn over my hook. I go to the next stitch. So if I need to find the V, it's right there. Then I can turn it. I can see that hole. I'm going to put my hook through the hole. So I have the back loop and the front loop both on my hook. Yarn over, pull up a loop. So I have 3 loops on my hook. Yarn over, pinch the base, pull through 2. Yarn over, pinch the base, pull through 2. All right.
We have a lot of questions. Well, a handful of questions. Does it matter which direction you turn at the end of the rows?
Nope. Doesn't matter at all. And you can chain and then turn, or turn and then chain. That doesn't matter either.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to have you guys keep doing these double crochets down this row. And in the meantime, we're going to do a little intermission here. So if you need to sit down and do a little break, you absolutely can. Let me get over here to the share screen, and there we go. Do you need me to go to the next page?
Yeah, next slide.
All right. There we go.
Okay, so everyone, I hope you're having a great time with Marley so far. We are doing our best to keep up with all the questions. Thank you guys for the questions. Thank you for being with us today. We are about halfway through the class. It's 1:40 here in Chicago, so feel free to get up, stretch your legs. A reminder that we have the special introductory offer of our I Like Crochet magazine today. It is $11.88 for an entire year subscription, which is 75% off the normal price. The link is here at the bottom. We also posted it in the chat. So if you guys have any questions about that, feel free to let us know. Reach out to us during or after the class. We can help you get set up with that. And let's see, we also had a quick little poll that we wanted to ask you guys. So hopefully you can all see the poll. We are wondering, just a fun little question, how much money did you guys spend on yarn supplies in the last 30 days? So I wish I had some Jeopardy music to play for you guys.
I know. I was going to say, that's kind of a personal question. Like, I'm like,
well, it is
I gotta
anonymous.
make sure nobody knows. I mean, I spent like $200 this morning. So not even joking.
Yep.
Yeah, that's how that goes.
All good.
All right. Are you good? So we got that code there. You guys will be able to get the code in an email later on too, so you won't miss out for sure.
Yeah, let's see. We have about 60% of people voting. It looks like the most popular question under $25 with 56% of the answers. So, okay, we're going to close the poll and get back to the class.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to stop the share. We're back to me. Let's go back to my hands.
Yes. Spotlight. There we go.
All right, y'all. Cool. So I didn't get very much further because I wanted to make sure I had something for you guys. But just want to get down this row with double crochets. Now, double crochets are going to be your friends, especially as we're coming up to the holiday season and you want to make quick items. You could use double crochets and make a scarf or something, and it would come out very quick. And you could use like a multicolored yarn, and you could have all sorts of fun stuff happening just with the basic double crochet. So one thing I do want to point out, because not everybody does it like I do in the sense of making sure you're controlling these posts. But when you yarn over your hook and you go into that stitch, again, remember I'm going in so that way I have the front loop and the back loop, or the front leg and the back leg, both on my hook. Yarn over and I pull up. You'll kind of see I have my hook sort of diagonal. And the reason I do that is I like to work my stitches so that my final draw through two, my hook is parallel with my work. So I usually will have my hook diagonal like this, and then my final draw through, my hook will be parallel. Here's the difference, okay? So I'm gonna do it the way I do it. So I have it sort of diagonal. My loops are all the size of my hook. I yarn over, I pinch, I pull through. I yarn over, I pinch, I pull through. My hook is up here. Everything is the same height. Everything looks great, right? I want to show you what happens with other people. They yarn over, they'll go into the stitch, they yarn over, pull up a loop, and then they pull this up. All right, can you see how that is now super long? It's much longer than mine was, right? Now watch what happens. They'll yarn over. Well, first off, they pull it up. It's not the size of their hook anymore, right? Look, that's much bigger than my hook. So it's almost as if it doesn't matter what your hook size is at that point, because you're not even making your stitch the size of the hook. You're just pulling up a loop. And then they yarn over and they pull through. And now the loop still isn't the size of my hook. Then they yarn over and they pull through. Look how big that stitch is compared to the size of these stitches. These stitches are the size of the actual hook that we're using, right? This stitch has gone rogue. It is just whatever I decided I was going to pull it up that day. It's that big. So as people complain that they can't get row gauge, I want you to remember that gauge given in a pattern is subjective to the designer. So if the designer is writing it in such a way that they're pulling up like that, then that's a problem. But if you are doing that and you're not getting gauge, that's a problem. So just remember, your hook is there to be your friend. It's to help you get everything the same size. Just like if you were baking and you were using measuring cups, it makes sure that your loop is the correct size. Now I'm down here at the end of my row. And one of the number one things that happens with new crocheters is their edges are not straight. They end up losing stitches or having too many stitches. And it's typically because they don't know where the last stitch of their row is. And that's why I had you add that stitch marker. So in that stitch marker, notice it's through the whole V there. So I've yarned over my hook. I'll go into that V. So I know that's my last stitch. I yarn over, pull up a loop, and then I finish my double crochet. And I never had to wonder where my last stitch was because I already had it marked. Can you see that? So that's why I have you mark that stitch. All right, so I'm going to set this down for a minute and let's continue on because I'm going to bring this in. So we have done what are called double crochets all the way down this row. So this row, we went this direction. This row, we're going this direction. So if you were reading a chart, this is what it would look like. All right, this is a double crochet symbol. It's usually more like that, but you get the point. So now if on the next row, we wanted to go back this way and we wanted to go back to single crochets, how many chains do I have to do for my turning chain? You guys know this answer. We would only have one. And the reason we only have one is because that's the height that a typical one chain is. So we would have one chain and turn, or turn and chain one. And just to give you guys a little tip, so one chain is typically a single. Two chains is what's called a half double. Three chains are typically a double. And then you have a 4-chain turn, which is a treble. Notice the difference between a double and a treble is it's just one extra like hash mark. And there's a tip there. If you're following charts, that hash mark can represent how many times you yarn over your hook before you complete the stitch. So with a double, you yarn over your hook once. With the treble, you yarn over your hook twice. If I were to do something like this, I don't even know what that name is, but I know I yarn over my hook 4 times to complete the stitch. Does that make sense? So this is like a little tidbit here, just to give you like a cheat sheet. A chain one is typically a single. 2 chains are used for a turning chain for a half double. 3 chains are typically used for a double. 4 chains for a treble, and then so on and so forth. So on this next row, we're going to go back to just plain old single crochets, and we're going to work them just like we worked the doubles as far as into the part of the stitch that's underneath both of the V's. And we're going to go back this direction. Okay. Hope y'all are with me here on this. So I'm down here at the end. I'm going to chain one, whoops, and then turn, or turn and chain one. It doesn't matter. And then I'm going to go into this very first stitch. So I go into that first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. So I have 2 loops on my hook. I yarn over, draw through 2. I pause here because I want to make sure I move up my stitch marker. So I look for the V behind the loop on my hook. I put my marker through that V, so that way I know where it is when I get back down to it. Then I go to the next stitch. So if I want to look at the top, I can find the V there. I want to make sure I'm putting my hook to where I have the front leg and the back leg of the V. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. I'm going to do this all the way down the row. Believe it or not, those of you who are out there and you're actually giving this a try, you are crocheting. When you're working down the row and you're getting more and more comfortable, you're going to have to be very diligent and conscientious that you don't accidentally start to pull your stitches too tight, because you're just like, oh yeah, I'm cruising, I'm going to make that all nice and tight. You want to make sure it's always the same size as the hook you are using, okay? And if you use my little tip with pinching that base and pulling through, you'll be just fine. Notice that I put my stitch marker down there at the end. So I know that that is my last stitch, which is important because with this turning chain out here, it looks like there should be another stitch there, but we are not counting that turning chain as a stitch. If we were, we would actually work into that chain, but I don't want you to. So that's why it's super important to use those stitch markers, because it can be very enticing to think to yourself, oh, I need to put one more stitch out there. But I don't want you to, because if you did, all of a sudden we'd have 11 stitches, and then on the next row you'd have 13. Like we'd start increasing, and then you'd have like something and be like, well, Marley said, but no, I don't want you to do anything. All right. You with me so far?
Marley, real quick, is there a difference between a chain or a foundation chain? Michelle is wondering.
Yeah, so there are foundation stitches, if that's what she's asking. This is our foundation chain that we worked into. And then there's like a foundation single crochet and a foundation double crochet. That's a completely different technique. That would be something for like a crochet 201 class. But this is considered your foundation chain. And then we worked into our foundation chains. These are our turning chains because they're the chains that we use to step up to the next level of stitches depending on the height of our stitch. Okay.
Lisa is also saying her stitches are way too loose. What do you suggest? Do you have any tips?
So is she making her stitches the same size as her hook? So if you are pulling up that first stitch like I showed, Lisa, then you want to make sure you're making your loop the same size as your hook, okay? That's the best way to maintain control. We're going to go down here. We're going to do this next row. We're going to be reading our chart in this direction. So I just finished this last single crochet. That's the one I just worked into right there. So I'm going to go back this way. And this time, let's do a treble crochet. I mean, why not? So if I want to do a treble crochet, that's where there are 2 hash marks on the symbol. So that means we're going to yarn over our hook twice before we even put it into our stitch. How many turning chains do I need to do to start? Come on, Jenny, you know this answer.
Sorry, I'm reading some comments. They're looking for your knitting class from a few weeks ago. So.
All right, so if you look down here, I did tell you guys it would take 4 turning chains to equal the height of a treble crochet, according to the Craft Yarn Council. So I would do 4 chains to start off, okay?
We did get some answers. Melody and Dara and Linda and Anne, they all said 4.
They all said 4. It's because they're listening.
People
they're
are
fantastic.
Listening. Thank you, guys.
You guys are getting a really advanced class here with me showing you charts, because there are some people, they're like, I don't know how to read charts. It's like, it's just a visual representation of what you're doing here.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Thank you.
Right? All right, so we have our 4 chains we're going to do, and then we're going to do a treble crochet, and we're going to place this treble directly on top of that single crochet. If it happened to be pointing towards that single crochet, we would have put it there, but it shows that it's right on top of that one, so we're going to put it right there, okay? So I'm going to move this. We're going to start off with our chain 4. So I will chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, it doesn't matter if you turn and then chain 4 or chain 4 and turn. It does not matter. We're not going to count this as a stitch again. So it is going to look funny out there. It's going to butt out, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to yarn over my hook 2 times. Now you'll notice I do rest my finger on those yarn overs so that they don't expand, you guys. I keep them nice and tight and close together. They're the size of my hook, and I just maintain control. Now I put my hook into the stitch, just like I was doing before. See, I'm just underneath both legs of that V. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Notice I'm diagonal, right? I'm not pulling this up like this. We talked about that because, I mean, that just makes my hook size pointless. So I want to make sure the loop is the same size as my hook, and that's where I am. So now I'm going to yarn over, I pinch the bottom, and I pull through 2. So I have 3 loops left on my hook. I yarn over, I pinch the bottom, I pull through 2. I have 2 loops on my hook. I yarn over, I pinch the bottom, I pull through 2. See how that one's even taller? Yeah. And it's the same sort of anatomy as all of the other stitches in that it has a V right at the top. So I'm going to place my stitch marker right there at the top. And I know that that's the last stitch of my row. So when I see this turning chain, I'm not going to be tempted to work into it because I know that that is the last stitch I want to work into. And now I go ahead and I continue on. So I yarn over my hook twice. I hold on to those yarn overs. They don't go anywhere. I take my hook. I go right into that stitch. Notice it's the V. So like if you need to turn it up to see it, go ahead. But it's essentially, there's a hole right there. You just stick it right through that hole. Yarn over. Pull up a loop. Make sure everything's the same size as your hook. And then begin to work the transition. So you yarn over. Pinch the bottom, pull through 2. Yarn over, pinch the bottom, pull through 2. Yarn over, pinch the bottom, pull through 2. Notice my height on that stitch is the same as the other, and that's because I maintained control the whole time. Okay. So, and I want you guys to know, even though these turning chains are poking out there, my edges are straight. Okay. I don't have extra stitches. That's just the nature of turning chains if you don't count them as a stitch. Okay. So I just want you to know that that's perfectly normal. So I'm going to do this again. I'm going to yarn over twice, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. You guys see what I mean when I said to you that in the symbol for the treble, it has those 2 hash marks. So every time there is a hash mark on one of those big T's, that lets you know that that's how many times you would yarn over on your hook. So if I was looking at this and I didn't have any words, I know that even if I didn't know what that stitch was called, I know that I would start off with 2 yarn overs, and then I would begin to work my stitch. Yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. Another thing to point out is this T here. I think of the top of the T there, that's the top hat. That represents your V. So that top hat there, that represents the V at the top of your knitting, or at the top of your stitch. And so if you're going along and maybe you come across and you become a really great crocheter and you come across a stitch that looks like this in a chart, you could be like, all right, well, those look familiar because I see hash marks there. They look like double crochets, but there's only one top hat. Well, all that means is you partially complete all of those doubles, but then you would have one final yarn over to make it all so that it was all one stitch. So it's like you would put all 4 of those stitches into one stitch, but the result is still only one stitch because you only have one top hat. Whereas this similar stitch could look just like this, where it looks like 4 double crochets, right? It looks like 4 double crochets, but each one has their own top hat. So each one of those are their own double crochet worked into one stitch. Whereas this one up here are 4 partial double crochets worked into one stitch, resulting in one final stitch, where these 4 full double crochets result in 4 individual stitches. Can you see a difference there? It's important to point out as you're reading charts. It just makes sense. Charts make so much sense. Okay, so I'm going to do these trebles. So I'm going to yarn over twice, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. I remember seeing a question all about the gauge, that they can never get gauge. This is the best way to do it, guys. Always make sure your loops are always the size of your hook. Maintain control of them. Go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, make sure that loop is the size of your hook, and then yarn over, pinch everything so they don't extend, and pull through. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through.
Someone is asking, do you go through the middle or the side with both parts of the loop?
For this here,
yeah,
like the V. So for what we're doing, we're going through what I think this person is saying, the side. I'm putting so that way the front loop and the back loop are on the hook, essentially. Like I'm going to where I'm working through both of them. If I was just going to work through just the back leg, I would actually go down the V and just pick up the back leg. If I was just working the front leg, I would just pick up the front leg, just like so. All right, so there's lots of options. I mean, we could go around the post, we could go around the back post, we could drop down here and create stitches down here. Like, I mean, look at this, guys. This is a whole nother stitch. And I didn't work it in the row I'm on, but I worked it all the way down there. Like, there's so many options, which makes crochet very scary for people who are very type A, because there's too many places for them to put their hook. It's not just put your hook here, it's not like knitting where I have a stitch and it's like, I'm working that one, I'm working that one, I'm working that one, I'm working that one. It's, I could put my hook anywhere I want, there's a lot of freedom to this. All right, so I'm going to do a treble again, and I'm just going to get to the end of this row with my trebles. And yes, some people would call these a triple, but the appropriate word or the official word is called a treble. It's a treble crochet.
Dara is wondering, because this stitch is so tall, should you
Mhm.
use the recommended size hook when working the triple?
The recommended size hook for what? For the yarn?
Probably for whatever pattern, I think.
I
Like,
mean, yeah, if a pattern is written with this stitch pattern, the hook recommendation is, and the gauge will all be given with this hook or with this hook and with this stitch pattern. So you don't have to make a change because of the stitch pattern. And it is a tall stitch, so you have to remember that. Like if you are in an uber hurry and you want to make something super fast for like tonight or something, you could use a treble crochet and like a bulky weight yarn and just like an end hook. You could do that and get something really big, and you would have a little bit of airiness to it, but it would still be very pretty. The double crochets, obviously there's a little bit of space to them too, but they aren't as tall as the trebles, but they are taller than the single crochet. Single crochet, you guys, they're short and squatty. They're like a square. And if you're not careful, your resulting fabric can look like Kevlar, in the sense of it'll be really stiff and not very pliable because of the nature of the single crochet. All right. Now we've been working with solid stitches back and forth, but you can go into these stitches and put chains between, or you can do just what I talked about with like different stitches, many stitches into one. Like there's lots of options, but the good news is what you've learned here is a good starting point to crochet. Like you've learned about the turning chains, the singles, the doubles, the trebles, how to keep your edges straight. I mean, the only thing that I would like to include is how you include the turning chain as a stitch, but we could do that in future classes. But this definitely gets you started on your path to crochet. There's lots of things you can make with this. Yeah?
yeah, that's fantastic. We do have some questions.
Sure.
If you want to switch to
I can do that.
slide.
Yes. Let me get over there.
You guys, we had a ton of questions today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're going to do a brief Q&A right now. If we did not get to your question live, or if we don't get to it right now, please email us. We do have our contact information here. I am Jenny. I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. I realized that like halfway through. I'm like, shoot. Anyway, I was your moderator today. I also did have a couple of friends, my colleagues, Caitlin and Nicola, were here helping moderate and answer questions today. But, we're only 3 people. We had hundreds and hundreds of people today signed up for actually we had thousands of people signed up for our class today. So if we didn't get to your question live, please email us, reach out. Here's Marley's contact information and my contact information. Plus, don't forget to claim your special deal for I Like Crochet magazine. But real quick, let's get back to the questions. Marley, how can you tell from front to back, the right side and wrong side of your work with crochet?
Okay, so can they still see my hands in the little square box? I'm not sure if they can or not. Okay, so as you're working along your row and you're looking at, well, I'm going to call it the right side, or what you would think of as the public side, you can see like our stitches look nice and smooth. And then on the back side, they kind of look a little bit choppier. Like there's a definite, there's a texture difference between the front and the back of a stitch. And so when you're working on an actual project, a pattern will tell you which side is your right side or wrong side. If you guys haven't put it together yet, I really like stitch markers. So typically if a pattern says, hey, this is after you finish row 1, this is your right side, I typically will take a marker and mark it as my right side. So that way I always know, oh, okay, that's my right side. Does that make sense? So that's really the best way I know how to answer is pay attention to if it's a good pattern, it will tell you which side is the right side if it matters. And then you could always mark the right side. But you can even see here, can you see like with the single crochets, it looks like a little V here, but then these doubles, it looks like the back of the stitch. Mm-hmm. And then the V's right there, those were our single crochets. And this is the back of our trebles. And then if I turn it over, the back of the single crochet, see how it looks like it's like the 2 legs are apart. So on this side, it looks like the legs are together forming a V. And on this side, it looks like 2 legs that are separated and they're apart. And then the doubles, it looks like everything's together. And then we're back to singles right there. The legs are apart. The trebles, the legs are together. So, I mean, that's a great way to be able to to tell things. I don't know if that helps at all, but there you go.
You.
Cool.
In general, is crocheting easier and faster than knitting? Nancy would like to know.
All right. So Nancy, I'll be completely honest with you. I think learning to knit is easier than crochet, but crochet is faster and tends to be a little bit more, and take this with a grain of salt, it tends to be a little bit more creative because of the so many different places you can put your hook. So yeah, it's one of those things. I think it takes people a little bit longer to learn crochet, but I don't think it's necessarily like easier in the long run or anything. I do think knitting is easier to learn at the beginning because, like I said, it's very basic. Like, here's your stitch, it's on your needle, work into that stitch. Whereas crochet, I showed you like 5 different places you could put your hook in one different stitch. So I think that the options can be a little daunting, but once you get the basics essentially of, oh, this is how I complete a stitch, sky's the limit, y'all. You got this.
Thank you, Marley. We had a ton of questions too at the beginning when you were talking about your different crochet hooks. A lot of people were asking, where you get the different hooks, specifically that blue, the big one that you showed. Came like that, or how do you hooks that have special handles?
So my blue one, I got it from an Etsy shop called Touche Crochet. I love it. I should be an affiliate for them. Everybody asks me about their hooks. I also have some really nice hooks from a company called Lether and Company, and it's on Etsy. I mean, they have really nice wood hook handles. These hooks here, these are Susan Bates hooks. You can get these at Michael's or Joann's, or just about anywhere with those handles. And then, there's a specialty hooks like Furls hooks. I don't really use those too much. I know I have some. And there's plastic hooks. Here's a Furls hook. You can see it's different. And because I'm a pencil, I don't know, this just isn't very comfortable for me. I know a lot of my knife holder friends really like these hooks. I don't know. And then this is a real basic plastic one. I find these ones, I don't know what it is about them. I find them very comfortable in my hand, especially this one. These I think are my favorite. Like, I like how big and bulky it is. I like them so much. I actually just bought another set where it's just a little bit different of structure, but I like the hold. This one's my favorite though. I really like it.
All right, perfect.
Cool.
Okay, we did have some additional questions, but I think we are going to try to handle those via email after the class. If we did not get to your question today, you guys, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Marley, and we will get you an answer.
Yeah. And I have lots of beginner videos on my YouTube channel. I have lots of left-handed videos too. So people who are watching today,
questions, and I said that some videos after the class.
Yep, I have an entire playlist of left-handed videos on YouTube, so you can definitely check those out.
We did record today's class for those of you guys that were late and missed the announcement. We are recording this entire class. It will take a couple hours for the file to process because it's a long, it's an hour.
Because Marley talks a lot.
We covered a lot of ground today. We learned a lot. So we did record it for you guys to go back and rewatch whenever you want, practice your skills. For those of you that, that were late or had to leave early, we're going to send the whole video to you. We also did have a knitting class a few weeks ago. A few people were asking about knitting classes. So we did do a knitting class a few weeks ago with Marley. I can send a link to that as well. People are asking if we're going to be doing more classes. The answer is yes. Marley and I are in the process of planning some additional advanced classes for you all for both knitting and hopefully crochet as well. So stay tuned for additional information on more classes. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. My name is Jenny with Fave Crafts, and I like crochet, and we have Marley here, our wonderful host. Check her out at marleybird.com and visit Fave Crafts and All Free Crochet for tons of new patterns to practice. So
awesome.
Right. Well, thank you guys. Have a wonderful
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining us.
Awesome.
Bye,
Bye, Jenny.
Bye, Marley.